Charles Dickens was born in Portsmouth, England in 1812. His father, who was a clerk in the Navy, asked the owner of a shipyard named Christopher Hopham to be the godfather to his son. Hopham later became the inspiration for Paul Dombey, the owner of a shipping company in Dickens's novel Dombey and Son. In his childhood, Charles became obsessed with books and read many books that he could get his hands on, including the picaresque novels of Tobias Smollett and Henry Fielding, as well as Robinson Crusoe and 1001 Nights. When he was 12, his indebted father went to prison and he had to live with a family friend and an impoverished old lady who later became the inspiration for Mrs. Pipchin in his novel Dombey and Son. Later, he had to relocate again, and this time live in the house of a court agent named Archibald Russell, who was a good-natured, kind old gentleman with a quite old wife and a lame son, who later became the inspiration for the garlands in the old curiosity shop. During that period, Charles spent most of his Sundays visiting his father in the Marshalsea prison, and those visits had such an impact on him that he used the prison and many colorful characters that he met there in his later works. A few months later, Charles had to leave school and work 10 hours a day at a warehouse to support his family. The harsh treatment that he experienced while working there and the terrible conditions of the workforce left such a lasting impression on him that later made him a champion of socio-economic reform and the improvement of the labor conditions. 3 years later, when his father was released from prison, Charles went back to school at the Wellington House Academy, which later became the inspiration for Mr. Crickle's establishment in David Copperfield. In 1833, Charles began working as a journalist for a political paper called Mirror of Parliament, and later in 1835 for the Morning Chronicle. In 1836, the collection of the pieces that he wrote as a journalist was published in a book titled Sketches by Boz. While working for the Morning Chronicle, Charles became a regular visitor to his editor George Hogarth's home, and there he met his future wife Catherine, whom he married in April 1836. With the success of Sketches by Boz, Dickens rapidly progressed in his social and professional life and was approached by publishers Chapman and Hall to supply text for Robert Seymour's half-finished illustrations. The resulting story became the Pickwick Papers, and the introduction of the character Sam Weller by Dickens revived the series to massive success. Charles then wrote The Adventures of Oliver Twist for Bentley's Miscellany from 1836 to 1837, which established him as a successful novelist. It is mentioned that even young Queen Victoria was a big fan of his and read both Oliver Twist and the Pickwick Papers. From 1838 to 1843, he wrote Nicholas Nickleby, The Old Curiosity Shop, Barnaby Rudge, A Tale of Rides of 80, Master Humphrey's Clock series, and A Christmas Carol. In early 1849, he started writing David Copperfield, which he mentioned to be his most favorite work. It is believed that many aspects of the book were inspired by Charles's own life, and underneath the fiction, there were many elements of the author's own experience. From 1851 to 1853, he wrote Tavistock House, Bleak House, Hard Time, and Little Dorrit, which were all successful. It was at this point that his income from writing made it possible for him to buy Gates Hill Place in Kent, England. As a child, Charles walked past his house and always dreamed of living in it. During this period, Charles, who was always fascinated by theatre, undertook a series of public performances, which took most of his time and creative energy. New books soon followed, and from 1859 to 1861, A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations were published, which were huge successes. In 1865, Charles survived a deadly rail crash where the train's first seven carriages planked off a bridge. Luckily, the only carriage that stayed on the rail was the one that Dickens was traveling on. He later used the experience of the crash for his ghost story, The Signalman. In 1870, Charles Dickens wrote for his final work, Edmund Roth, and made his final public appearance at a Royal Academy banquet in the presence of the Prince and Princess of Wales. On June 8, 1870, Dickens suffered a stroke at his home after a full day's work on Edmund Roth. He never regained his consciousness again and died the next day. Contrary to his wish to be buried at Rochester Cathedral in an inexpensive and private manner, he was laid to rest in the Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey.